Hey, what's up? I want to offer another video. In this one, I want to talk a little bit about my understanding of my real ones, like being real. So and that's to the point, the purpose of what does it count for or mean to be real? What's the bottom line about being real? What puts us in the black? What puts us ahead? Black is like, so when you owe money in the old days when they had like ledgers and like they did accounting like without computers, um there would be they use different ink for different values, and so red ink means that you're behind, you're in the negative, and then black means that you're in the positive. That's like a positive sum, at least above zero. So you can have a business that has like overhead or cost, like cost of doing business, and for all the profit you make, all the transactions you make, you're really not actually amounting to something yet. You can be maybe investing and building something, but you haven't actually got up over into achievement, to consequence, until you get in the black, where you're actually in a positive margin, an affirmative margin. You're making progress. So what does it mean to get into the black about being real? So and that's a good question. There's a artist, a rap artist. I think his name is Casanova. He appeared on some different hip hop interviews, and I think he might have actually got a little bit of backlash for some statements that he made on hip hop interviews, where some things that we post online can be scrutinized by law enforcement, however we are intending something. And so he would be an example of that. But he also said something very valuable, maybe in that same interview that he suffered from, is that he said, like, for all this talk about like gangster or like keeping it real, what does that mean when a person walks into the bank? What can I get for that? What can I cash for that? And it's a good question, but it doesn't mean that there's not value to being real. So I think that if you go, sometimes you have to go way back to Jump Street. That means like the beginning of something, to appreciate something. So if you go in the Holy Bible, I don't mean to make a religious to make this a religious channel, or to promulgate one approach to faith over another. According to Arthur Avalon, there's many approaches to faith that are valuable and also necessary. So according to Arthur Avalon, the faith is the man. The faith is an expression of a man, and a man is an expression of a faith. Man referring to man, woman, and child, mankind. And so from that standpoint, it's actually vital to have different walks that would be fitting and appropriate and suitable to a particular person and their expression of a life on this earth. So I just want to say that from that standpoint, I respect different approaches to faith, and also maybe an absence of faith or a questioning of faith, if that's also a person's path. But just to reference the Holy Bible, the Holy Bible can be very centering when you're learning to have when you're forming a stance in life and an approach to life. As a young person, it can be very grounding, and also when you're in some form of difficulty, it can be very grounding, because I think the spirit that its authors were approaching it. Some people could say that its authors are actually the author of authors, speaking through different authors as the author of authors. And from that standpoint of inspiration, it is valuable and timeless, because a lot of time is objective, and is subjective, or is relative, because your sense of time it has a bearing on your understanding of your position. And your understanding of your position is also relative, because there's actually no such thing as absolute directions, because you actually need a reference of something, of another direction, to have a sense of bearing upon directions. And I think even what's considered magnetic north and south and east and west, that might actually be subject to change to a slight degree. But there's no such thing as absolute east, west, north, south, up, down, left, right, future, past, present. There's no absolute reality to that, other than there's no definition of anything. That might be the only thing absolute, is that there's no definition to anything. And yet that's the freedom to define and undefined and redefine and half define and over and under define, maybe as it suits a person's purposes of enjoying the opportunity to exist. But from that standpoint, that the truth within the presence and the grounding of the scripture, it can have many nuances and inflections that can gain meaning as a person gains experiences, that is references. So it's living in that sense. But the order also says that oratory may be still more valuable than writing, because when something's writing, it changes something in that it fixes something to like where living life and understanding is actually spontaneous, and living is growing. And so it's more vital being oratory according to Osho. But I still don't take anything away from the Bible and take much value from the Bible. But I also commend being open-minded, and not to say but to negate anything. But according to the Holy Bible, in the beginning it said, "Let us make them, that is man, in our image." So what's appreciated as the Lord in the original, some of the original chapters of what's presented as the Bible, is what remains of the Bible, is referring to a Lord as us. And I think that's significant, because some people might say that is that plural? Is that pantheism, which would contradict monotheism as a standpoint of the Bible? But if you've ever been in a group initiative of some kind, like heaven forbid, like military, that you'd have a purpose in military. Not that military is not a benefit to certain communities in the human experience. But I wouldn't wish that upon anyone unless they wish that upon themselves, or they felt inspired to do that. But in a group setting like that, it's more individual than individual. It's more singular than a person. A person can equivocate and contradict themselves and lean in different directions and be double-minded. An actual person can be a multitude, but a multitude can be more than a person. It can be more singular than a person in mind, purpose, initiative, and commitment. So sometimes an actual a group of disparate, that is respective and multiple, will appear as multiple members, can actually be more wise and more singular and more effective than an individual. Such as statements like the counsel, also in the Bible, in the book of Proverbs, I think it says the counsel of 7 wise men is superior to what an individual can fathom, howsoever wise. But it's also similar with initiative, purpose, commitment, and undertaking. So from that standpoint, what's called a Lord could be appreciated as a multitude of members or expressions of purpose that form a singular value. But the actual the diversity of members would actually make it more dynamic and even more vital than what would be one member. But it's a multitude in that sense. Let us make them in their image. So from that standpoint, I think that there's actually maybe no such thing as a man, is in that, for the sake of being a man, but there are men. So I would appreciate a man as not very different than a bubble, not any more consequential or formidable than a bubble. Yet a bubble is not even to be disrespected, because were you to see some bubbles floating around, you could appreciate that there may be some young people where you would see bubbles. And you can't be playing around young bears, young cubs, young children, young people, and not have hell to pay if you were to play around with that. So even bubbles can be serious from that standpoint. And also sometimes when you see things, you don't appreciate that you're seeing multitude of things. So I actually went by a very big deer. Some people from the old days might remember like allegories in media about mailmen having to watch themselves around stray dogs. But if you're a delivery driver, you have to watch yourself around stray dogs and stray wolves in off hours of the night. And so you see a big deer. For intensive purposes, you may as well have seen a big wolf checking you out, because one is that a food source and a predator are not different from one the other. And it can be appreciated that a wolf actually is an aspect of a deer, and a deer is an aspect of a wolf. But also, were you to see a deer blatantly, you can assume that a wolf wouldn't be far off and could have perceived you as clearly as a deer. Or if you were to walk out somewhere having just seen a deer, for intensive purposes, you may experience a wolf as soon, so you may as well have seen a deer. So you see a bubble, and you may as well have seen a very formidable person, or a person that would be protecting what would blow bubbles. But I meant to say a man can be no more formidable or less formidable than a bubble, but men is more of a current. And so sometimes you fall into the current of doing what a man would do to serve the purposes of a community. And from that point, you're operating and being within the current of men and manhood. So a men is always greater than an individual, but no less than an individual, or no more than an individual. But it's more of a current. But I think that our real ones is similar, is that there may be no such thing as a real person, but there are our real ones. And when you're doing real stuff, you fall into that current. But what that amounts to is that, anything can be taken away from you, or you can be cast, any light can be cast upon you. But if you actually are operating as a real person, sometimes when you are being affronted or disrespected or whatnot, or handed a difficulty, you may sustain that and land on that in such a manner is that could not be imitated if you had not been real. And the respect and pull that comes from that is worth favor. That is more than silver and gold.